prior player as their head coach. I know you went to all these innocuous stats and stuff. Has that happened before? And if so, who was it? Terry Crisp and somebody else?
I'm sure it's happened before at some point in this whole run. I can't say that I really looked ahead far enough to know that was coming. But yeah, I mean, it's. I was sitting here the other day. And it was the day that we named Danny Briere to his assistant GM position with the extra words in it, whatever it exactly is. Yeah. And I look up at the TV, and Scott Hartnell's getting ready to do color because Jonesy was off on national assignment. And I'm like, how did I get old enough that I'm sitting here getting ready for a game where Danny Briere is our assistant GM and Scott Hartnell's doing color on TV? Like, I don't feel like that should have happened. And that's kind of what is taken place over the years. You get these guys that have come through this organization. They've done well for themselves here, and they've gotten into the game after the fact, and made themselves a second career as a coach. And more and more of them are rolling through. It's been happening though for several years now. You mentioned Terry Crisp being one of them. There have been a bunch of guys over the years that have done it, and this is it just continues to roll on in that path.
And the two coaches, obviously Craig Berube just signed a new contract with the St. Louis Blues and won a Stanley Cup when he took over, actually, oddly enough, for Mike Yeo in St. Louis a couple years ago. And Rod Brindamore, one of the best coaches in the NHL, as a matter of fact.
Yeah. It's funny how you look at when you look at that situation and you look at it beyond the playing careers of the players involved, right? And I'm not saying that you have any ability whatsoever to make a transaction in terms of what the player is going to do, maybe for your organization once he's done playing. But the Rod Brindamore for Keith Primo trade, it was probably pretty even in terms of the playing careers. But now with Rod having done so well as a coach there, they came out way on top in that deal.
Yeah.
When you lump that in there.
Yeah.
That's why. I mean, that's probably. I would imagine that's why he stays there, right?
Yep.
Maybe
made it his home.
Yeah, maybe he goes and plays somewhere else and then ends up coaching in Carolina. But it's probably more coincidence than it is intentional. But
if he doesn't get traded there as a player for Primo, he's not the head coach there. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
I believe that.
So that would be a +1 for Carolina, I think, in that deal.
It's funny how that works out, isn't it?
Yeah.
Speaking of transactions, there's a few. So
it's been a busy morning.
Yeah, it has been. The following injury updates and transactions. This is from General Manager and President of Hockey Operations Chuck Fletcher. Flyers put goaltender Carter Hart out today. He was slated to play this game today. He has an eye infection and will not play versus Carolina. We'll see if he's available tomorrow. But for a goaltender, you need to be able to see. Minor infection, not a good thing to deal with. I imagine it's probably the only eye infection I really know of is pink eye.
Yeah, Lake Tahoe was about a year ago, roughly exactly right now, and that was a game that shows what happens when you can't see.
Yeah,
that was a tough one. And this just came up this morning too. This wasn't like a lingering thing over the last 3 days. Flyers were not. They didn't come to the realization that Carter wouldn't be able to go until this morning. So they literally had to probably get Kirill Ustimenko out of bed and get him down here. I would imagine today was an off day for the Phantoms after the weekend being what it was. But, it's a benefit of having your farm team close by.
Yeah, go old school Kirill. Throw your goalie bag and everything in the back of the car and drive down here ASAP because you're the backup goaltender.
Vroom.
Yeah, the Flyers have recalled goaltender Kirill Ustimenko. He's wearing number 67, by the way. On emergency basis from the Phantoms, and they've activated defenseman Rasmus Ristolainen and forward Patrick Brown off injured reserve, and they placed forward Wade Allison on injured reserve. So other than that, nothing going on here.
Nothing going on at all. And this is, the reason Ustimenko is up, we should mention, is that there was a bang, I guess some sort of minor incident involving Felix Sandstrom. He's got some sort of minor injury or something like that. Wasn't able to go this weekend. Yeah, exactly. So I don't know if that throws a wrench. I mean, we still have a lot of time till the deadline, but the thought was, okay, let's Martin Jones go somewhere at the deadline, and you bring up Sandstrom, let him finish out the season. You do have to consider that, I guess, when you're trying to figure out how you're going to approach that deadline with Martin Jones. I mean, Samuel Ersson has been out here for a couple of weeks. I guess you do have to kind of consider your overall depth at the position before you make a move like that.
Yeah, and if Sandstrom is able to be the backup, he will be. And we saw him that one game, and he performed extremely well.
Yep.
Also, obviously, the Flyers in a position with several players that teams do have interest in. At the top of that list, obviously, is Claude Giroux. Look at a guy like Justin Braun on an expiring contract. Rasmus Ristolainen, who'll be in the lineup today. You mentioned Martin Jones, possibly even others. And there's a lot of scouts in attendance today. Here's whose teams have representatives to take in this game today. How about the Colorado Avalanche? That's not anything shocking. Blackhawks, the Dallas Stars, the Florida Panthers, the Nashville Predators, San Jose Sharks, St. Louis Blues. They're in town, so that's kind of by proxy. The Rangers and the Seattle Kraken all have scouts here today.
Yeah, and it is every time I see these posts and people mention it, it is a function of the schedule sometimes. The Eastern Seaboard, obviously here, I-95 corridor, there's 4 NHL teams within 2 hours of one another. So a lot of teams have scouts based in this area, and that's just in the NHL. You've got Hershey, you've got Lehigh Valley, you've got the lower upstate New York AHL team. So your guys can hit a lot in a small geographical area. This is the only game in that corridor today. The only other game in the Eastern time zone is in Montreal. So these guys are, for the most part, a lot of these guys were going to hit this game anyway. But given the fact that it is shopping season, if you will, and there's so many eyes on the Flyers and what they have available, no surprise to see a lot of those names in here and a lot of those specific teams as well. I mean, Gar Joy from Colorado's in here almost every night. So that's not a surprise to see him. But
I wonder if Sakic will be here, though, because he was at the game yesterday on the island. Coming back from San Jose. So.
Yeah, I mean, I know Peter. Peter Chiarelli is here today. He would be here probably with St. Louis anyway for tomorrow. And sometimes these guys just kind of slip in here on a ticket just to avoid lists like this. It happens too.
Yeah, Chiarelli's also a name that's been in the news as a possible next GM or president of the Chicago Blackhawks.
Have you interviewed for that job?
I have not yet.
You haven't? I'm waiting for them to call me. They have interviewed more than a dozen people for that job. It is they are a very wide search.
Yeah, I mean, a woman from the Toronto Raptors organization, a gentleman from the Chicago Cubs. They're really doing an expansive search. They haven't gone to a radio broadcaster from Philadelphia.
Not yet. Okay. They
got opinions.
They I guess hire isn't the word, but they basically hired a staff to help hire the GM.
Yeah.
They named a committee and everything. So really trying to get that decision right there in Chicago. And they're at the point right now where they need it. They need the right person in that role.
Yeah, after what's going on there, they have a lot of work to do, for sure. And a lot of work to be done here today as the Flyers will take on the Canes. We'll tell you about this game. We'll kind of spotlight a few players to look at as well. Stay tuned. We'll take a quick timeout. We're back right after this on Flyers Game Day. Brian Smith, Jason Myrtetus on the BetRivers.com Flyers Broadcast Network.
individual face-off performances now since 1997. So 27 years, 26 seasons, I guess you could say, that they've been tracking that. And in terms of 90% or better while taking 20 face-offs or more, he was only the 16th player to do it in 27 years. Now, you get a lot of 90%. You get 90%ers every season. You get a handful of games where guys do that. But most of the time, it's guys taking, somewhere between, 8 to 15 face-offs maybe. You get it all the time with guys that just take 1 or 2, so we discount them. You start looking at it as being meaningful maybe around 7 or 8, I guess. And then, only the guys that take, really heavy numbers have ever had a chance to do it. For Giroux, it was his second highest face-off percentage as a regular face-off man of his career. He had a 92 and change one game. Anything higher than that was like back before he took face-offs regularly when he was rookie, first couple of years when he only took 1 or 2 a game. So it just doesn't happen very often where you take that many and you're that dominant. The league's only been tracking face-offs in the zones for the last few years, and that's because the league actually changed a rule. It was a little bit obscure, but it used to be that when you were on the road, you had to establish yourself first in the face-off dot, and that gives your opponent an advantage because whoever establishes it second can be in a constant motion, right? Mm-hmm. And they don't have to stop. Now it's the defensive zone team has to set up first, regardless of where you're playing. And then in the neutral zone, it's the home team. So they started tracking face-offs within the zone. So for him to be 10 of 11 on the defensive zone, that's another very impressive feat. And that's only been done 24 times this season across 780 games. So that's kind of just putting it in a little bit of perspective without taking a huge deep dive into the complexities of the face-off. There's not a lot of people that have games like he had the other night.
Yeah, it's an astounding number. If they could reseed the playoffs by face-off win percentage, we'd be in good shape.
Yeah,
Flyers were
that's a great idea.
Second in the NHL last year in face-off percentage.
Just say because of COVID, we need to do that. Right?
Yeah, and that's with Couturier and Giroux, two of the best. And this year, without Couturier for a good portion of time, fifth in the NHL in face-off percentage. So Carolina, one of those teams, though, ahead of them. 50 or number 4 in the NHL in face-off percentage to see. So one thing to look at inside today.
And we were talking about it earlier. I mean, Claude Giroux in particular was not a stellar face-off taker until about halfway through his career. And there was a point somewhere in the mid 2010s, around 2014, 2015 there, where the Flyers were struggling as a face-off team, which is, it's been so long that it's hard to remember that they ever actually struggled as a face-off team, but they weren't doing well. And there was a point there where Bob Clark went down on the ice, which you don't see him doing that very much anymore. Went down on the ice and worked on faceoffs with the guys. And something there took, because ever since around that point, the Flyers have been one of the top faceoff teams in the league, and Giroux in particular has been up there ever since. So over 56% easily for that whole time.
Yeah, we can't look back and find out what Bob Clark's face-off numbers were because they weren't tracking.
They weren't keeping track of it. Yeah, there were a lot of things back then they didn't really watch. We didn't start getting things like secondary assists until I don't know when.
60s.
Yeah, little things like that. They just would write things down and not. The league spent 5 years going through every score sheet in league history. They have it all on paper, but they spent 5 years going through it and putting it all in a database that's now available to the public, NHL.com/stats. And there's some remarkable numbers in there.
Wow. Talk about a tedious gig.
No, I cannot even imagine.
Holy God.
5 years of reading score sheets every day.
And it was in handwriting.
I mean, who knows what they actually had. I mean, the sheets that we've been sending them for the last modern history are all in triplicate. They're carbons. And so you're reading carbons that are like the third copy of something or whatever, and then maybe having to go back and look at newspapers. I don't know. It's just it is kind of kudos. There was Benny Ercolani was the dean of this. He's now retired from the NHL, but
he's in an insane asylum.
He was an NHL employee from the early 70s at least, all the way on until a couple of years ago. And he kind of spearheaded this whole effort. It's really paid off in spades for people like us that like to look up stuff like this.
Well, we're going to take another timeout here on Flyers Game Day, and we're going to come back and we're going to discuss. Here's what we're going to talk about, Bryce. I'm going to give you forewarning.
Okay.
How the Flyers play 60 minutes, not 57 minutes, and try and end what is now a 4-game skid. We'll be right back. Brian Smith, Jason Myrtetus, Flyers Game Day from the Wells Fargo Center on the BetRivers.com Flyers Broadcast Network. Brian Smith, Jason Myrtetus, Flyers and the Canes. Now, Brian, the last couple of games, Flyers were in position with a 2-goal lead heading into the third period against Pittsburgh. Ended up getting that game to overtime, but ultimately losing it when Chris Letang scored. And then the last game against the Washington Capitals, caught a late lead in that game when Jerry Mayhew scored. And then 2 goals in the closing moments of that game by Garnet Hathaway. And then eventually an empty netter led the Flyers to their 4th straight defeat, 5-3 against Washington. Despite the fact that they're depleted with injuries, they were in those 2 games, but you got to finish those games. Carolina played yesterday against Pittsburgh, won 4-3, and they're back at it today. Can the Flyers play the full 60 minutes here today and come away with a win and end this skid?
Yeah, they have Carolina, I guess, as close to being right where they want them as they can, given this overall scenario. You're on.
You know where I'd want Carolina today? In Raleigh.
Yeah,
not here playing us.
Yeah.
They're a good team.
But if you have to get this game out of the way, I mean, you got 2-day games in a row. So in both cases, your schedule as hockey players a little bit disrupted. Not a ton of travel to get here, but still some some travel involved. But the Flyers are going to have to play. I don't know. I don't want to say they got to play a perfect game, but they got to be pretty close to it, because this is a Carolina team that is outscoring its opponents on the season 171 to 118. They are allowing just 2.4 goals per game on average. They're out shooting their opponents almost 5 full shots on goal on average, 33 to 28.7. They are, like you said, stingy. The Flyers have got to bury the chances that they get in this game, because if a chance goes by 2 minutes into the game and you don't bury it, there is no assurance that you're going to get that chance back. So really from the very get-go, it's almost not as much about playing a full 60 and closing it out like they haven't done the last 2 games. It's playing a full 60 in terms of jumping on them early and making sure that any opportunities they get, they try to bury them, because again, they're not going to come very, very often. And past that, I mean, if you've got a lead in the third period of this game, you've got to buckle down, and you've got to just again, you don't want to squeeze the sticks too hard. That just kind of makes you worse. But you've got to be aware of what's going on around you. You've got to be in the right positions at the right time, and just again, learn from those last 2 games and trying to execute it for tonight.
And when Carolina is playing their 3rd game in 4 days, they played a matinee yesterday at 1:00 in Pittsburgh, back-to-back road games as well. Flyers lost to Carolina back on November 26th, 6-3. Was that the Black Friday game? I think it was. Yeah.
Yes, that would have been Black Friday.
Black Friday, and they beat Carolina in Carolina back on November 12th, 2-1.
Seems like a different season.
Well, basically it was a different team at that point.
I mean, my goodness.
But when you're facing this Carolina team, they lost Dougie Hamilton to free agency and signed with the Devils, and they replaced him with Tony DeAngelo. And in 42 games this season, he's their 3rd leading scorer. He's got 9 goals, 31 assists for 40 points, only behind Svechnikov and Sebastian Aho for points leading this Carolina team, and 15 power play assists. He's been good. But all 3 of those guys, including Teravainen, Trocheck to some extent as well, you got to keep an eye on all these guys when they're on the ice, especially Aho, who's magical.
The last time this team lost consecutive games in regulation was November 30th and December 2nd. Since then, it's either been just one-off losses, or it's been a loss paired with an overtime point. 1-2 in a row coming into here. They lost to Minnesota, lost to Florida before taking the wins in Nashville and Pittsburgh. And now they are entering what, from their perspective, is going to be an easy part of their schedule. Flyers, Blue Jackets, Oilers, and Red Wings. So you almost hope that they're looking at it like, a chance to coast here, and the Flyers can snap in and take advantage of that. But, this is probably a more veteran team that would do something like that.
Yeah, the Oilers all of a sudden, under a new bench boss, playing a lot better, although their last game wasn't. But they're now in playoff position. The coaching change has worked there. Game 2 here of a 7-game or 8-game homestand for the Flyers. Carolina today, St. Louis tomorrow. Doesn't get any easier, but they're riding this 4-game skid right now. Who's the player that's got to jump out today in this game for you, for the Flyers to come over there? I mean, obviously Martin Jones got to be a big part of it, getting called to duty with Carter Hart out with the eye infection. But other than the goaltender, who's it got to be for the Flyers?
Well, for me, I'm looking for Ivan Provorov to have a bounce-back game. I want to see him recover from the other night and just kind of go out there and dominate defensively. I mean, we've seen the minutes from him. That's never been a problem, but I'd like to see him go out there, shut some things down, and maybe get a couple points to me.
He had a good game the other night until that play.
Yeah.
I mean, you play Washington, you hold Ovechkin off the scoreboard, you hold Backstrom off the scoreboard.
Yeah, that whole line.
Yeah. And somehow you find.
I wonder there's a line on Garnet Hathaway scoring the last 2 goals to win that game.
Oh, the odds must have been just through the roof. I would imagine. But the Flyers are trying to end this 4-game skid here against the Carolina Hurricanes today. We've got matinee hockey on President's Day here at Wells Fargo Center. Weird to have a game starting and the sun be out, but that's or light outside at least, and that's the case. Stay tuned, though. Tim Saunders, Steve Coates, they're standing by with the countdown to face-off, and then all the first period action between the Flyers and the Canes. You've been listening to Flyers Game Day on the BetRivers.com Flyers Broadcast Network.